Welcome to our podcast again. It's nice to have you here. And today, me and Debs, we're going to be talking about art therapy and a little bit about the therapeutic benefits of art as well. Yeah, it should be an interesting conversation this morning. I think this stems from as well the gallery that I've got my art in Brighton. It's called Liberation Art Gallery. And what makes the galleries unique is that they've got art therapists in there. So they do art therapy sessions in there. And I've learnt quite a lot about art therapy whilst I've been there, and in particular, like the differences between um, using art as therapy, I suppose you could say, and art therapy as its own kind of profession. And I think that's an important place to start because a lot of people don't realise to be an actual art therapist, you need to have a master's, you need to be qualified in art therapy,
Mm.
because I think the main difference, well, what should be the main difference is kind of using art for mindfulness, to relax and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot lighter than art therapy. Art therapy is more about dealing with trauma or grief or any other struggles that you might be going through in life. And kind of, I suppose, using art as a vehicle to talk about those things and to communicate about those things.
Mm.
And I know you've done art therapy in the past, Debs. Is there anything in particular that kind of stands out to you in terms of the difference of the definitions?
Yeah, so the difference between, I would say, mindful art and art therapy, I think of mindful art as a little bit like meditation, but using art as a vehicle. So when you do meditation, you use different things as I call a vehicle, like, so you might use your breath, you
Hmm.
might use methods like noting, and you can also do um, mindful art where you don't have to be able to do art, you don't have to be an artist. You can use it as a tool to sort of tap into that creative side, the intuition, the sort of the place where you're not the stillness. Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
also how that relates to art, there's lots of different links, and we'll probably do this over several episodes, won't we? Because how that relates to art is is if you can sort of get into that, just doing it as an exercise, then it helps you with your intuitive side of actual art when you're painting. But
Mhm.
you do not need to be an artist to do mindfulness. And I'm sure you don't need to be an artist to do art therapy. However, like you say, it's a lighter touch. You can do this if you haven't got, for different reasons than you're going through a trauma and you've gone to a therapist. And so it's a little bit like doing meditation and self-awareness as opposed to going to a therapist, isn't it? Do you think?
Yes,
Would you say that's
definitely.
the
Yeah,
difference?
yeah, that's the main distinction. I think where it can get a little bit muddled sometimes is when artists who aren't qualified in art therapy take the whole therapeutic nature of art and try and use that to help people with more serious problems. Um, and we've actually seen that quite a lot in the gallery in terms of outsiders trying to do things like that. And that's a really dangerous practice because the thing about being a qualified psychologist or psychotherapist um, is that they also need the support to manage people through that therapy process using art.
Mm,
So, for example, somebody might come with you with some really hard grief that they're dealing with. Maybe their child's died or something like that. And that therapist themselves needs to make sure that they've got the tools to also look after themselves because it could be that that might trigger something in them. we've all got biases around certain situations and stereotypes and things like that that we also might project onto other people. So there's loads within the therapy practice that actually you need to be properly qualified and supported to do that job properly.
Mm.
Um, and I think at the moment, because it's so popular, all this talk around well-being and taking care
Mindfulness and
of
yeah, yeah.
mindfulness of that. I mean, I don't think there's anything at all wrong with using art as like a mindful practice and, like you say, getting into that meditation.
Mm.
It's when people start to kind of blur
Mix
their
that up with the yeah.
yeah and think that they can take it further. Um, there's a really fascinating series on the BBC called Couples Therapy. I don't know whether you've ever seen it.
No, I don't think I
Um,
have.
you should watch it because it's fascinating, especially if you're interested in psychology. And it
Mm.
takes you through the journey of this psychoanalyst speaking to couples about their problems. The really interesting thing is when you see her with her coach and she's unloading all of this stuff and getting guidance from her coach to how best to deal with that couple. So, yeah, it's situations like that that I think artists need to be responsible in that area as well, because I think in order to um, help people, they've got to understand the boundaries of what you can do in that space as well.
Mm.
Makes sense?
Yeah. And that said, have it doing some mindful art is a very good practice, isn't
Yes,
it?
yeah, absolutely, and it.
Because it's like doing meditation and doing it's, these are things that you can do for yourself.
Mm,
But yeah, you don't necessarily, it's not, and you can have methods of doing it, but that's not to replace, it's just simply isn't art therapy. That's mindful
no,
art and
no,
art, they're just
that's
different
it.
things.
They're just
And
different.
so don't confuse them. That's as simple as that. So if you wanted to go to an art therapist, you'd be going there for reasons that you want to work something through. Yeah, I'm guessing, but you could talk to the art therapist about that, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm not one. The art therapist that I knew, and it's a long, long time ago, so I went to a couple of his workshops, so they weren't really art therapy, but he now runs the Rudolf Steiner School he's the headmaster now. But he became an art therapist. I can't remember which school it is, so sorry. But he his training is through the Rudolf Steiner route, so he works with children, and that is a really, really interesting thing in itself. It'd be really interesting to get on the podcast as well, actually.
Yeah.
But um, but they have a different ethos around education and children and that side of things. But I also think because we've talked about mental health and how art therapy helps that, but I think that
Mm,
I've done a lot of counselling because I've had physical health,
mm,
which obviously knocks onto your mental health. But it's like I've gone to onto the physical health services have psychology services too. And
mm.
they also have the OTs where you're pacing and doing all of that. So I've done a lot of that, but also I've done quite a lot of mindfulness. And I definitely think that art has helped well-being. And I think that it's in, I think me and you both agree it's where we really meet, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Like the benefits of art, and I think that just the whole practice of art, you have to be present in order to do it. But at the same time, it lets you kind of drift off a little bit, like in forms of it being like a kind of meditation, doesn't it? And it
Yeah.
also, if you start to dig deeper on it, something we've talked about previously on our podcast is things like how art has this reinforcing effect of like you being a more authentic version of yourself and how it helps you express that. Expression is a massive thing as well, isn't it? Like it's really nice to be able to go to my art to be able to express all sorts of things, whether I'm in a joyful mood or whether I'm feeling certain emotions around things, I can express that through my art, and that's a really nice kind of outlet, isn't it, to be able to do all of those things.
And for anybody who's not done mindfulness, because that's you're actually doing an exercise, say for instance with art, without judgment.
Mm.
Yeah. And if you catch yourself thinking or wandering off, like, because that's how the brain works, you just start to think of other things, or you start to judge, oh no, that looks really bad, or I don't like what I've done there. That's it's noticing that and
Yeah.
saying that's not what I'm doing here. This is an exercise. I'm just experimenting with it. I'm playing, and that's the sort of thing. And just allowing yourself to go. I want to put. I'm naturally just allowing yourself to do the lines or put the paint where it just feels like being right. And so really, if you can learn to do that, then you're learning to tap into that intuition. So that is really good. So yeah, yeah.
And it's giving you that freedom as well, isn't it, to be able to acknowledge just what you want to do and give you that whole creative space, isn't it? Just to kind
Mm.
of let go. And like, there's so many things in life that we feel like we have to be perfect at. But I think the whole art thing, it gives you that permission, doesn't it? Just to be able to do what you like. And you do get to a point with you, it's hard at the beginning, but you get to a point where it's like, there's no such thing as failure in art. You just kind of keep going, don't you? So it gives you that space as well to like make mistakes and get things wrong and try new things. And I think eventually it does give you like quite a lot of resilience as well, doesn't it? Because you know that to go through that process to get good at anything, you need to be bad and you'll make some good art and then you'll make something and you'll think, oh, that's awful. But you get used to that as well, don't you? That kind of that
Uh,
failure.
Yes, yes. And to be honest with you, I think that the ill health I've had has given me resilience as
Mm,
well,
yeah.
because having a thing that happens in your life that isn't going the way that, oh, I once went to, I don't know, an existential therapist. It was through the NHS, and she wasn't actually, they were doing CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy. And she was like, actually, I'm an existential therapist. And I was like, oh, this is exciting. I went and looked it up and everything. So, existentialism is when you expect life to go the way you plan it in your head, your future. But life's never like that. The only constant is change, yes. And so it was really fascinating because it's about how you react to things as you move forward. And it's exactly the same
Yeah.
with art. You expect your art to come out the way it is in your head. And sometimes, if you allow it to just come out the way that you that it just comes out, let the art sort of happen. Obviously, we're not talking here about building skills and all of those things, because if you want to be an artist, you want to do both. You do want to have an understanding of what colors mix with what. But what happens is, if you can sort of separate it out and do that, eventually it all comes together and you start to not only do art in a mindful way and be able to drop into that flow, which, yeah, you can
Yeah.
actually do that with the knowledge that's sort of embedded because you've done all of that background stuff and into the art as it comes out. And then things start to come out and they just surprise you, don't they? Sometimes you get surprised.
I love it when that happens though, when you've planned something on the canvas and you start going, and then I always think it's like the middle bit is a bit of a crunch time, isn't it? And then it just kind of goes
Mm,
where you weren't expecting it to. And that's the lovely thing about art is it surprises you as well, doesn't it?
yeah. But often if you allow that to happen, that can be a real expression of what's happening in your own life or a connection to something. So that painting that I did that
Mm.
was for the family tree painting was to do with, my grandson being born and all sorts of things that I never even, if anybody wants to see family tree, it's on the website. I never expected it to come out like that. When I
Yeah.
started, there wasn't a tree in there at all. And it was like, and it's like when I used to write, and this is, I always think it's easier to understand writing than art when you explain it as an analogy. So if you create a book or create a poem or whatever it is, you'll have an idea of what you want that poem to be about, an idea. Sorry, we're going off a little bit
Oh,
from
it's all right.
mindfulness. Just think, but um, the characters, yeah, I used to develop the characters. So you do each character, yeah, who they're going to be, what they're going to do, and then if you can put them in a situation, and those characters could be paint, they could be the colours, they could be what the subject is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then I used to put them in those things and I used to go, and this is the plot line, but and then you're like, well, but how would that character do? What would he do?
yeah.
And sometimes they do things that you weren't thinking they would do.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
sure it's the same with
yeah,
art.
yeah,
And so if you can get out of your own way, which is the mindfulness, coming back to mindfulness, not only do you get surprising art, you actually get art that's coming from within, which is
yeah,
more authentic.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
magic, actually. It really is
And
magic.
don't you think it's a lot more satisfying as well to be able to go with that flow more and than try and control everything and make it look like exactly how you've planned out in your head?
Yeah,
I think it's more enjoyable process, isn't it, to go with things and go, oh, that bit of paint looks nice there. I wasn't expecting that to happen, but I'm gonna leave it as it is because it feels right.
yeah. And learning that. And don't get me wrong, it's not an easy process, but mindful art definitely moves you more that way, doesn't it? I
Yes.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to step into all of that.
Um, can we swing back to art therapy? Because I probably know a lot less about art therapy. So
Yeah.
the only things that I did with the art therapy, and it's not really, I went to a workshop with an art therapist, not art therapy. There's a difference. And we did some real wonderful. We did veil paintings with watercolor, and it was just done really slowly. You'd put a veil, and then you'd like let it dry. It was just so. It's like you slowed yourself right down. And he gave us a focus at the beginning because he read out some. It was the. I can't remember what it was, but he read out something and we had to pick a scene from it in our heads,
Yeah.
which is quite similar to how we work with the art actually sometimes, or how I work. I sort of think, what is it, the subject, but let it just sink there and then move forward. And he would do a veil in one color, and then you'd do like different just have lots of little mixes. We had little pots that had different mixes of watercolor paint, so thinner and thicker and stuff. And it was just, we had 2 days and the relaxation was unbelievable. It was just, and I did another workshop with him where you just sort of tuned into planets and things. It was just something that, and a little bit more about what you wanted from
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
people were saying, peace and this, that, and the other. And I was like, joy.
Yeah.
And then I had I sort of aligned to Mars, and there was a tree involved. It's a long time ago. And I did this red tree, and it was just like, it wasn't anything you'd put on your wall. Not at
Yeah.
all.
No,
Not
no,
at
it's
all.
not meant to be.
No, but it did express
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And I think it's like a tool, I think. I mean, I'm not an art therapist by any means at all. So let me just caveat that. But I think it's more of a tool to I suppose, start tapping into like some things that are a little bit more beneath the surface. So
Mm.
instead of just talking about it, because there's a limitation as well as to what we can express in words. I think was it maybe Edward Hopper that said that something along the lines of if I could say it with words, then I wouldn't need to paint. That's how I feel about painting as well.
Mm.
So I think art therapy is on the same kind of premise that it just helps you to uncover a few things that maybe you're not as aware of. And by doing more physical exercises, you can start to explore it, but explore it in like a gentle way as well. Like you were talking about how much you enjoyed the process of the workshops and doing that. So it's kind of a gentle way to get you into it as well by using the art.
Really gentle it was that was. But yeah, I'm not sure it's the same thing. That's why I said workshop, because I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
wouldn't.
I mean, I do know that they do practical exercises during the art therapy sessions, and I'm sure there'll be sort of cues and things that they give them in order to speak about particular subjects. So it's probably quite a similar thing within art therapy. And like you say, it's certainly not something that, you know, they would want to put on their wall or something for show. Um, and as well, also sort of there's also sort of rules, guidelines, boundaries as well in terms of like the art therapist actually keeping the artwork that the participants have done and then give it to them back next time and things like that around how the artwork's used, how it's shown, because all of this as well is you've got to remember that it's very sensitive. It's not like how you think of traditional kind of artwork where a lot of certainly if you're a professional artist you create stuff to sell and for people to see and to speak about, whereas there's a lot more confidentiality and a whole safe space that needs to happen around
Yeah.
art therapy when you're dealing with like delicate subjects.
Because if you think about it, when somebody looks at your art, it can feel very personal, and that's just your art. So if somebody's actually expressed
Yeah,
something
yeah.
and then somebody comes along, they could really
Yeah,
make you feel bad, couldn't
it could
they?
do damage. Yeah, particularly if they're working through whatever it is that they're working through. So
And
that's an important part of art therapy as well, like how the artwork's kept, where it's kept, who keeps it, who sees it, all of that kind of thing.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah. So what happens coming back to your gallery? Because some people might be like, well, how do I see an art therapist? Do I need to have art as a background? Do I need to be an artist? Obviously, I would say no, but I'm not an art therapist. So have you got those sorts of answers?
Yeah, no, you don't need to. If you are seeking some art therapy, you don't need to have any experience in art at all. Particularly because it's not about the finished product and being able to use certain materials. It's about using that just purely as expression. So if you think about art, it's a lot more on the abstract side of things. You don't need to be able to draw a beautiful self-portrait of yourself in order to go see an art therapist.
Yeah,
The idea is that like they'll provide the materials as well. They'll provide the safe space. They'll provide the the instructions or the kind of the format of it as well for you to follow. What I would say, if you are seeking art therapy, it's really, really important that you find someone that's professionally qualified and has got a master's and all of that, because there are people out there, unfortunately, that are practicing this stuff and aren't qualified. I've also myself seen things like courses on places like Facebook for art therapy that is clearly not a recognised qualification,
so do
which
your
is
homework. Do your due.
terrible. Yeah,
Yeah,
do your homework.
yeah,
Um, find a space or a person that feels right. And I suppose, like with anything, with finding a therapist, it might take a few goes as well till you find that right person, because you've got to find somebody that feels right with you, haven't you? And you can have that dialogue and that kind of connection with to open up. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And if you do find a therapist that you do connect with, it can move things on tremendously. And
Mm.
sometimes it's good to go and see a therapist. My most recent time that I saw a therapist, I was actually quite well at the time. It had taken the NHS, I think it was a long time anyway. I think it was over a year. So at the time that I asked for some help, I didn't get it. But actually, she said, let's just do it anyway and it helped a lot because I have an ongoing health condition, and so I have to manage that and also manage my mental health from the point of view of I haven't got a mental health condition, so to speak, but I've got the problems that you get from physical health and sometimes not being able to do things and the pacing and all of those things. And I think sometimes if you can look after yourself when you're well, you're less likely to have that. Because I used to have very big dips of ill health and then big, yeah. You've got to get that balance um, over the whole sort of. Sometimes you don't think about it when you're well, and you just go, "Oh, I can do this, that, and the other." Yeah, and it's so it can help at any time.
Yeah.
It's
Because
yeah,
quite often, I think you've brought up a really important point, because quite often people wait, don't they, until they're at their lowest or at
yeah,
their worst to seek help. And
mm,
actually, when you're at that point, your judgment and perspective on things is probably a bit more clouded, would you
yeah.
say?
It is. It is.
Harder to get yourself back up again. Whereas if you're on a more of an even keel, if you can speak to somebody about whatever it is that you're dealing with, whatever it is that you're feeling is completely valid. And it doesn't have to be something majorly traumatic either for you to go to therapy. Like
No.
everyone has problems, don't they?
Yeah,
Everyone has
absolutely.
their own little things going on in their life that are difficult to deal with. It's
Mm.
just the nature of being a human being, isn't it?
It is, yeah, yes. Yeah, or you could have something like, a grief that you're trying to work through, or that you have got a health condition that, disrupts your life, or whatever it is. It doesn't, yeah, seeing a therapist, it helps to put things in perspective. But
Mm.
shall we go back to the mindful art?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Only from the perspective of if what I sometimes used to do as well is when I was ill, I would go into the practices that helped me, like the meditation or whatever.
Mm. Yeah,
But now, and it probably did help seeing somebody when I was well as well, because it is that perspective and not being defensive type thing.
yeah,
Yeah. And now what I do is try and do that on a regular basis. And I know you do morning pages, but I'm also doing it from the point of view of the art, of helping the art. Yeah. So all the time I do try and so I'm not doing mindful art in as a practice, although I am thinking about doing that actually on a daily basis because I do meditation so I was thinking
yeah,
about doing a mindful art practice.
yeah,
But what I do is definitely think in terms of intuition, resilience, not getting too tied up in the judgment of my art.
mm,
And I do that as all the time. I just do that with my art. So, but it's taken a long time. It's not an instant thing, is it?
no, it's not. It takes a lot of hard work actually to kind of get there, because there's so many, what's the right word, kind of biases that we have towards creativity and making art and all those kinds of things that you have to unpack, don't you, in order to like give yourself permission to
Yeah,
create.
we've talked about quite a lot of those on our podcast, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I suppose it's those psychological barriers, isn't it, that can kind of get in the way. So being able to use tools to get yourself in a more mindful place does actually help release that judgment and that pressure that you might be putting on yourself, or whatever it is. I've not got enough time to do this. I shouldn't be doing this. I should be
I
doing
haven't
something
got the
else.
talent, all of these, yeah.
There's so much, isn't there?
There
So
is, yeah.
I think having some sort of mindful practice really helps
And
you.
getting the resilience to not listen to other people's judgments as well, not
Yeah,
just your
yeah,
own.
it's massive, isn't it? Yeah,
It's really massive. That
yeah.
is, yeah,
Just helps you just get to the canvas and do the painting and kind of let it take over itself, sort of thing.
yeah. And the other big thing is you don't have to be a professional artist to enjoy art. You don't have to even have touched a brush before to enjoy art.
It's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. All you have to do is watch children enjoy art, and then you go, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it's.
It's a bit like, do you remember Bob Ross, his videos?
Mm,
Landscapes, and he'd do his little dabs on the canvas. That's always really relaxing to watch because he's got such a nice attitude towards it, hasn't he? He's so
yeah.
like
All the
really
happy accidents and everything. Yeah.
yeah,
Happy little accidents.
him, really relaxing.
Yeah, yeah. And that is it. I think in some ways being curious about your art is a good place to be. Just curious what happens. So I've talked to you about Ralph before, haven't I? Well, Ralph was in here. So Ralph's my 7-year-old grandson, and he I gave him a watercolor pan, and they're really nice watercolors that I'd got because I've been going out sketching. So I gave him this pan and a good brush, and I gave him some paper, and I was like, go for it, Ralph. And he was doing the sky, and what children do is they put like a line of blue across the top, and that's just how, because their mind can't, to take in the whole world is
Yeah,
really,
too much.
it's
Yeah,
really difficult. So they have to like sort of categorize it in their heads. This is just a normal development thing.
yeah,
But what he was doing was he was like leaving the gaps for the clouds and stuff. But so he was putting the watercolor down, and I didn't say to him, I didn't tell him any watercolor techniques. He was
yeah,
just, I did say to him, spray it first to activate it and do a little bit of um, and just play with the paint. I just said, just do your own picture, do whatever you like. And he was like, oh, what I might do is I might just do this. And he started to like go, what happens if I spray with onto the actual paper? And he was doing all of this. And I was like, that's amazing, because you're just doing what, and this is the sort of thing that if you can approach your art with curiosity and not get too caught up in it, and definitely note if you're judging yourself,
yeah.
and yeah, try it. Try it. We'll have to do a couple of exercises and put them up on YouTube so people can see what we mean, because it's
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'd be good.
mindful art. And if you want to, we'll perhaps put the details of your gallery in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they'd be more than
Yeah,
happy to do that. So people can have a look, and there's a whole page on all the art therapists that are in Liberation Art Gallery as
yeah,
well. Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, you can find out more information there.
yeah. And I think we've definitely done half an hour. That was a good
Yeah,
chat.
that went quick. I felt like we covered a lot as well. We went kind of back and forth through a lot of different things, didn't we?
Yeah, we might break it down slightly over a few
Quite a
episodes.
big subject though, isn't it?
It is quite a big subject. And it's a big subject that I think is quite close to our heart, really, isn't it? Because we do believe that everybody can paint if they want to. It's just, yeah. And we also believe very, very strongly that it's good for your well-being.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have to have any sort of issue for it to be good for you, same as
Yeah.
meditation. Or
Yeah. It just helps, doesn't it? Improve your overall mood.
it does, it does. And on that note, should we say bye for now?
Yeah. See you soon.